We recently told you about the huge debt problem in the United States. It's a hole in public finances that is already 120% of GDP, and that Donald Trump doesn't seem to want to address, because all forecasts indicate that the deficit will remain above 5% for several years. Nevertheless, until now, however, the Republican president had an ace up his sleeve, a secret weapon. We are, of course, referring to Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. The entrepreneur behind companies like Tesla and SpaceX was tasked with easing government finances by reducing wasteful spending and increasing government productivity. He even had his own debt clock ticking on the ultimate goal, saving more than $4 billion a day. Well, until a few weeks ago, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Elon Musk was spending more time in the White House than in his own manufacturing plants. He and his team, mainly out of Silicon Valley, spread terror among American civil servants, with tens of thousands of layoffs and surprise cuts. However, everything has blown up.
Trump tells Inner Circle that Musk will leave soon.
Early reports revealed that Musk's possible dismissal was an aesthetic issue. The entrepreneur was gaining a very negative reputation, and Trump wanted to remove him from the front line. However, the problem seemed to go beyond that. Just this week, Elon posted on his X account a video of Milton Friedman raging against tariff policy. Not only that, he also took on Peter Navarro, one of the Trump administration's top economic advisors, literally calling him a moron. Peter Retardo, and dumber than a sack of bricks. For whatever reason, it is clear that this matter smells of scorched earth. Does all this mean that DOGE will disappear? That there won't be any more cuts in public spending? Well, possibly. But DOGE was a big lie from the very beginning, a dismal failure. And in fact, it was most likely just a marketing ploy by Trump to win some votes, and, who knows, receive funding from Elon Musk for campaigns like the Wisconsin court case. But let's take it step by step. Why do we say that DOGE has been a great failure? Well, the answer perfectly exemplifies the Trump administration, and it can be defined in one word: chaos.
Trump admin fires, then unfires nuclear weapons workers.
Elon Musk is an excellent engineer. And as an engineer, one of his strategies for optimizing processes is to take things away until you see when the system collapses, which is basically the same thing he's been doing with the federal government. The problem? Well, the government is not X. If X goes down for a couple of days, well, hey, that's okay. But if a government agency breaks down, the consequences could be fatal. Many of DOGE's screw-ups don't even stem from this Elon Musk strategy, but from the fact that their workers are even less competent than the civil servants they are trying to fire. And if you don't believe me, don't worry, we're going to give you plenty of examples throughout the video. Be that as it may, even if DOGE were to run like a Swiss watch, the challenge would still be immense, or rather, impossible. Musk has said several times that the US government is so corrupt and inefficient that the entire deficit could be cut if you eliminate wasteful spending. But if we look at the numbers, 85% of the increase in public spending since the 2008 financial crisis has gone to social security and healthcare, plus interest on the debt. Or, to put it another way, to spending that is hardly related to widespread corruption. In short, a whole lot of fuss about nothing, which fits quite well with a previous theory that in reality, the Republican government never had any intention of lowering spending. And if you don't believe me, let me give you an example. One of the items that DOGE was supposed to cut was defense. Well, Trump just announced after a meeting with Netanyahu that he will increase the budget to $1 trillion, the largest in history.
We also essentially approved a budget which is in the facility, you'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong because you got a lot of bad forces out there now.
DOGE is not working, and Trump seems more concerned about putting tariffs on penguins than cutting spending. If everything stopped at this point, well, bah. But it all gets even worse. It turns out that in reality, it's quite possible that DOGE will not only not save the federal government money, but on the contrary, it will increase spending. How is that possible? What has caused DOGE to fail miserably? Can anything be done about public spending before it's too late? Well, in this video, we tell you all about it. Let's start by making one thing clear. Wasteful spending exists, and it is a scourge. Case in point. During COVID, the Trump administration passed the CARES Act, a public injection program of more than $2 trillion. They basically sent checks to tens of millions of American households, and it was especially well publicized because in an election year, people were receiving checks with Donald Trump's signature on them, something unprecedented. This aid package also included a very lax line of credit to help entrepreneurs in times of need. A year later, Biden also approved a very similar program. But in the case of the checks, they were without his signature. The problem with this whole public financing program, there were virtually no controls, so anyone could borrow for anything they wanted. And don't think you need to be an expert in tax engineering, not at all. The only good thing is that the loans are public, so we could take a look at them ourselves. There is a loan titled Traffic Fines, another one that goes to finance a company called Free Money Limited Liability Company, and so on, with thousands of examples. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of USAID, the US organization focused on third world economic development, which used funding to give talks about, I don't know, the lesbian dances of the indigenous people of the Congo. And yes, this news is true, but of course, it is one thing if there is wasteful spending, and quite another if that is the cause of the deficit. So, let's put the figures on the table. Starting with USAID itself, which devotes barely 3 to 5% of its budget to talks, events, and media. The vast majority goes to infrastructure aid, or, more importantly, medicines and vaccines. Thousands of people depend on these drugs, and there have already been a few deaths since they have been withdrawn. But I guess for Elon Musk, this was the most expendable part of the budget. Be that as it may, USAID has made a lot of media noise, but its impact on the budget is basically zero. 0.06% of the federal budget, in fact. So let's look at other items. But first, check out for the following news.
Musk mulls sending all Americans $5,000 checks using DOGE savings.
$5,000 to all Americans. Adds up to almost $2 trillion, virtually the entire US deficit in 2023. And let me ask you, DOGE has only been in operation for a few months, but how much money do you think it has managed to save? I remind you that, according to the DOGE debt clock, about $220 billion should have been cut by now. Do you think they've reached that figure? That they've made it to $100 billion? Well, no, not at all. According to its own website, DOGE has cut $55 billion. But pay attention because even this figure is completely inflated.
DOGE quietly deletes the 5 biggest spending cuts it celebrated last week.
We've already told you that the team behind DOGE, well, what can I say? They don't exactly seem to be as professional as the SpaceX engineers. For example, DOGE posted on its website that it had eliminated a useless contract which had actually expired 20 years ago. And there are plenty of examples like that. Want another example? Well, how about the US government had spent $8 billion on a seemingly insignificant contract for border control equipment? The problem, well, it wasn't $8 billion, but $8 million. And someone had made a mistake with the zeros. And yes, it's true that this mistake hadn't been made by DOGE, but by the contractor. Meanwhile, other government agencies had already realized it and had fixed it. It was only DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that came about to tell the government how it has to operate. That was the only department that had not realized the error. And well, we could also tell you about the $200 million cut for international development that was counted 3 times in the same database. The silver lining is that these errors have now been corrected. At least, and this must be recognized, DOGE is being completely transparent with its cuts. The downside is that, well, if they made so many mistakes in so few days, not much could be expected. What's more, according to the Manhattan Institute, which is a think tank that advocates lower government spending, DOGE has only cut $2 billion. All the rest of the money was either falsely cut or had been cut previously by another agency, or was taken out of one line item and put into another. Here's yet another example. In his campaign, Trump promised to eliminate the Department of Education and thus save $200 billion. And the truth is that he has kept his promise. A few days ago, he signed an executive order that theoretically eliminated this administration. The problem is that, in practice, he didn't eliminate anything. He simply changed the name, moved some powers to other public agencies, and did not change a single comma of the budget, which, by the way, are basically scholarships. But then, When they do cut spending, a court forces them to reinstate it because they have done so in violation of all the laws. In fact, DOGE is already facing thousands of complaints and doesn't seem to be having much luck in court. Elon Musk's team may know a lot about technology and the things that go on in Silicon Valley, but there doesn't seem to be any expert in legal proceedings at the helm. Conclusion, $2 billion. That's the figure you have to stick with. Less than 1% of what they should have already cut, according to their own target, and barely 0.03% of the federal budget. The question is, why hasn't it been able to cut much more? Well, simply because there isn't much useless spending to cut. Remember how Musk laid off about 20,000 civil servants? Even if he were to lay off 25% of the entire federal workforce, he would only cut 1% of the entire budget. Not even that could be done easily. Think of it this way. Top civil servants have their position protected by law, so firing them is extremely complicated. So what has DOGE done to lay off the temporary workers? But let me ask you a question. Which worker is most likely to be inefficient? An older person who has been in the job for life and who is practically impossible to fire, or a young worker who has to earn their keep in order to get their contract renewed? The answer seems obvious, but of course, DOGE's goal is to cut for the sake of cutting, without focusing on what spending is useful and what is not. It's true that there are many redundant civil servants who are only there to carry out useless procedures. The problem isn't the paperwork, not the civil servants. If you fire the staff but don't change the regulation, then the bureaucracy will not disappear. You will simply have half the staff to do the same work. Or, to put it another way, bureaucracy will be much slower. And take note because we have evidence on this topic. In 1992, the FDA, the US Food and Drug Agency, created a mechanism that allowed it to raise more money without having to go through Congress, and use that money to recruit more staff. According to academic studies, adding 100 more employees reduced the wait time to approve new drugs by 3.3 months, and it's estimated that this faster access to drugs has saved between 140,000 and 310,000 years of American lives. But there are even more studies. One of them, for instance, found that when government engineers retired, projects suffered more delays and cost overruns. According to this analysis, laying off 1% of California Department of Transportation engineers would delay projects by 3.21% and increase cost overruns by 5.6 percentage points. In short, laying off workers doesn't always save money in the long run, especially if you lay off the youngest, most innovative and motivated staff. And this is also true of science. Imagine if an investment firm were to boast about how much money it has stopped investing rather than what percentage return it has made on its investment. Well, Elon Musk is also cutting back on several scientific agencies, from fundamental physics to medical studies. This reduces spending, yes, but in the long run, it hurts finances. For example, every dollar the National Institute of Health invests in medical studies has a return of $2 to $3 in the form of new drugs. And more generally, many studies agree that for every dollar the government invests in research and development, there is a benefit for society as a whole of between $5 and $10. Truly outrageous. So much so that many of these projects fund themselves by taxing this return. Of course, this is an average. There are very profitable projects, and others that are a disaster, but DOGE is cutting the budget indiscriminately without doing a study first on which items to improve. And if you ask me, this is very disappointing. This man you see on the screen is Luke Farritor, the winner of the Vesuvius project. This project was a contest in which several scientists competed to see who could unearth the secrets of completely carbonized papyri. This task was gigantic, but the results were spectacular, and the crucial factor was that this contest had very well designed economic incentives to encourage scientific development. The ideas in this project could revolutionize the way we do science and make us 1,000 times more productive. Luke knows this, and yet it doesn't look like DOGE is focusing on introducing these kinds of reforms, but rather on cutting budgets like a monkey with a chainsaw. Of course, this does not detract from the fact that there are scientific projects that are a real scam, and that only survive due to public money. Ted Cruz, a Republican politician, published a database with scientific projects that had received government grants, but were actually woke propaganda. We're talking about 3,400 projects with grants totaling $2 billion. But it's the same here as with the New York Times. Ted Cruz's mates have not done a detailed analysis of the projects, they have simply searched for keywords. For example, if a project had the word trans in it, then it made the list, even if it referred to the chirality of mollusks rather than transsexuals. And to this type of blunder, we have to add another problem. that is that there are many scientific projects that do use woke words to get funding. Because during the Biden era, it was easier to get grants if you said that the project would help marginalized minorities. So if you were going to ask for a grant to cure cancer, you would say that among the beneficiaries there would also be minorities. And let's see, this shouldn't be the case. Science should not fall into this ideological bullshit, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the project will try to cure cancer for real.
It reflects poorly on the Biden administration that you could only get a grant to cure cancer if you suggested you might teach an underrepresented minority child about it. But surely it also reflects poorly on the Republicans when they propose it for cancellation, just because it did include the sentence about minorities.
Bottom line, Elon Musk has hardly cut a significant portion of the budget, basically because it's impossible to do that without cutting pensions or healthcare. But it's just cutting the most cost-effective parts of federal spending. And let me give you one last example that encompasses all of these problems. DOGE's assault on the IRS, the US Treasury. For some reason, Musk believes that if he eliminates IRS workers, then taxes will magically go down. Of course, their salaries are not even a drop in the federal budget, yet the workers are extremely productive. To give you an idea, for every dollar they invest in auditing an American in the top 10% richest, the IRS collects $12 in fines when they discover that he or she was evading taxes. I mean, you tell me which company has these profit multiples. I don't know, it's almost like Musk wants the IRS to not be able to audit higher incomes. I'll leave it up to you to guess why that might be. But we don't want to end this video without making one last comment. Ironically, the first victim of Musk's chainsaw was not a federal employee, but the other founding member of DOGE, Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy had a very different approach to what DOGE should be. To begin with, he advocated that DOGE should remain a private consultancy and not an official government body as it is now. But more importantly, Ramaswamy was focused on eliminating regulations and making government more efficient, while Musk was focused on cutting government spending by laying off workers. In the end, Elon Musk's vision won out, and Vivek Ramaswamy jumped ship. Probably a big mistake. Perhaps he should have taken note earlier of one of the MVPs of Javier Milei's government, Deregulation Minister Federico Sturzenegger. Unlike Musk's group, who are basically Silicon Valley engineers with no federal government experience, Sturzenegger had been compiling laws and promoting change for decades. You only have to spend 5 minutes on his Twitter accounts to see the differences. The Argentinian minister deregulates, goes case by case, and studies each sector in detail before changing the legislation. What's more, and this is critical, his team works side by side with the rest of the government agencies, while DOGE are outcasts who nobody likes and are always looking for a fight. Anyway, I'm very sorry to tell you that Elon Musk is not going to solve these problems. First, because he wasn't doing it, and second, because he already seems to be more out of government than in it. And at this point, it's your turn. Do you think DOGE will make good on its promise to cut $4 billion every day? And if so, will it be wasteful spending cuts? Or will it end up pruning the most productive branches of government? You can leave me your answers down in the comments. And as always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, go ahead and like it, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. See you next time.